Right, let me ask you something. When was the last time you heard a politician basically admit they might not deserve to win the next election? Because that's exactly what Rachel Reeves just did at the Edinburgh Fringe, and honestly, the audacity is almost refreshing. Almost. Welcome back to UK Daily Coffee, where we serve up British politics hotter than your morning brew and twice as bitter. So picture this, you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer, your boss's approval rating is currently sitting at -43, which, for context, is lower than a limbo bar at a dwarf convention, and you decide the perfect venue to address this is the Edinburgh Fringe. You know, that place where comedians go to die slowly in front of audiences of 12 people eating overpriced sandwiches. The irony is so thick you could spread it on toast. But here's where it gets interesting, because Reeves didn't just show up to crack jokes about fiscal responsibility. She delivered what might be the most brutally honest assessment of Labour's predicament we've heard since they took power. And when I say brutal, I mean watching your mate try to parallel park level of uncomfortable. Speaking to Iain Dale, Reeves basically said, look, if we don't actually change this country, we don't deserve to win again. Now, on one hand, that's the kind of accountability we rarely see in politics. On the other hand, it's a bit like a chef saying, if this soufflé doesn't rise, I probably shouldn't be cooking while you're watching it collapse in real time through the oven door. The Chancellor acknowledged that voters are disappointed, which is politician speak for people are absolutely furious and we know it. She said people are impatient for change, and then, and this is the kicker, she admitted she's impatient for change too. Imagine being so frustrated with your own government that you, as the person literally running the Treasury, are sitting there thinking, come on then, when's something going to happen? It's like being the driver of a car and complaining about how slowly you're going. Rachel, love, you've got your foot on the accelerator. But then she drops this absolute gem, I've got the job of making sure the sums always add up, and it doesn't always make you popular because you can't do anything you might want to do. Translation, I'm the grown-up in the room who has to tell everyone we can't afford the pony they all want for Christmas. Which, fair enough, someone has to be the mathematical killjoy, but it's hardly the rallying cry that's going to get voters excited, is it? She continued with what might be the understatement of the century, you certainly can't do everything straight away, all at once. Right, because heaven forbid we expect a government to actually govern effectively. It's not like they had 13 years of opposition to work out what they wanted to do when they got into power. Oh wait, they did. This is where the whole thing gets properly surreal, because Reeves is essentially saying, look, we know you're disappointed, we're disappointed too, but also we can't actually do much because maths exists. It's like a restaurant advertising, come for the food. We might disappoint you, but at least we'll be honest about why we can't make what you ordered. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say, the black hole in the public finances. Because that's what this all comes down to, isn't it? The Conservatives left behind a financial mess so spectacular it makes a toddler's attempt at making a sandwich look organized. But here's the thing about inheriting a mess, at some point, it stops being the previous person's fault and starts being your responsibility to clean it up. Reeves claimed the government has got the balance about right when it comes to taxation, which is political speak for we're going to tax you more and hope you don't notice. She said no one wants to pay more taxes, which is like saying no one wants root canal surgery, technically true, but missing the point entirely. People don't mind paying taxes if they can see what they're getting for it. What they mind is paying more for what feels like less. The Chancellor also pointed out that borrowing isn't free, which is Economics 101, but apparently needed saying. It's like having to explain to adults that you can't just keep putting things on the credit card forever. Although, to be fair, given how the previous government handled the economy, maybe some people did need that explained. Here's where it gets really interesting though. Former Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds has just piped up suggesting a wealth tax for the next budget. Now, Dodds isn't just any old backbencher having a go, she actually quit Starmer's government over his decision to cut foreign aid to boost defense spending. So when she's suggesting wealth taxes, it's not just policy wonkery, it's a former insider saying you're doing this wrong. The timing is absolutely exquisite, isn't it? Just as Reeves is out there saying they've got the balance right on taxation, you've got a former colleague essentially saying no you haven't, tax the rich properly. It's like watching a family argument play out in public, except the family happens to be running the country. And speaking of timing, let's talk about those polling numbers, because they're more brutal than a Simon Cowell audition. Keir Starmer's approval rating hitting -43 isn't just bad, it's maybe we should consider a career change territory. 7 in 10 voters think this Labour government is at least as chaotic as the Tories were, with a third saying it's actually worse. That's not just disappointing, that's catastrophic. Think about what that means for a second. The Conservatives gave us Liz Truss's mini-budget that crashed the pound, multiple prime ministerial resignations, and enough U-turns to make a GPS system dizzy. And people are looking at Labour and thinking, yeah, this lot are just as bad, if not worse. That's not just failing to meet expectations, that's limbo dancing under them. The £5 billion U-turn on welfare cuts that helped tank Starmer's ratings is particularly telling. Because it shows a government that's either making policy on the hoof, or making promises they knew they couldn't keep. Neither is particularly encouraging when you're trying to convince people you're competent enough to run a country. What makes Reeves's Edinburgh appearance so fascinating is that she's essentially admitting all of this. She's not pretending everything's fine, she's not spinning the numbers, she's just saying, look, this is hard, we're trying, but we might not succeed. It's refreshingly honest, but it's also politically suicidal. Because here's the thing about politics, voters don't want honesty about how difficult everything is. They want results. They want to feel like their lives are getting better, not listen to explanations about why they can't. It's like going to a restaurant and having the chef come out to explain why your meal is taking so long instead of just bringing you the food. The Edinburgh Fringe setting adds another layer of absurdity to all this. Here's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, responsible for a £1 trillion economy, addressing the nation's financial future at a comedy festival. The metaphors write themselves, don't they? Although at this point, you have to wonder if it's intentional. Maybe they figured if you're going to deliver bad news, might as well do it somewhere people expect to laugh at disasters. But here's what's really striking about Reeves's comments, they reveal a government that seems genuinely surprised by the reality of governing. The bit about being impatient for change themselves suggests they thought it would be easier once they got into power. It's like someone who spends years criticizing how slowly traffic moves, then gets behind the wheel and discovers there are actually reasons why cars don't go at 100 miles per hour through city centers. The challenge now is whether acknowledging these limitations helps or hurts them. On one hand, voters might appreciate the honesty. On the other hand, they might think if you knew it was going to be this hard, maybe you should have had better plans. It's the political equivalent of a student telling their professor, I know this essay is terrible, but writing is really difficult, technically true, but not exactly inspiring confidence. What's particularly telling is how Reeves framed the disappointment. She's not denying it exists, she's essentially saying it's inevitable. No one wants to pay more taxes, everyone wants more public spending, borrowing costs money, these are the constraints of reality, and someone has to enforce them. It's a very grown-up way of looking at politics, but grown-up and popular rarely go hand in hand. So where does this leave Labour? With a chancellor who's honest about their limitations, a prime minister with approval ratings lower than a snake's belly, and a voting public that's already comparing them unfavourably to one of the most chaotic governments in recent memory. It's not exactly the foundation for electoral success. The question is whether Reeves's approach, this brutal honesty about the constraints of government, will eventually pay off, or whether it's just political suicide with better PR. Because there's a fine line between managing expectations and admitting defeat, and right now, it's not entirely clear which side of that line Labour is on. What do you think? Is Rachel Reeves being refreshingly honest, or just defeatist? Are Labour managing expectations, or have they already given up? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want more daily doses of British political chaos served with your morning coffee, make sure you're subscribed because trust me, with this government, there's going to be plenty more where this came from. Until next time, this has been UK Daily Coffee, keeping you caffeinated and politically informed, one disaster at a time.